Ladies and gentlemen, greetings and hello. I was recently browsing this subreddit when I came into this subreddit post, and this post arrives to me not long after this Discord message that I sent in my Discord like 2 days ago or something. What I'm trying to say with that, I think, is that I have thoughts and ideas about what it is to be yourself, and I wasn't going to do anything with those. It's a main channel video at some point, but then I saw that post just this morning. And I thought, well, I've got thoughts about that, and I was going to make type of that out, and then I thought, well, I just make a video about it anyway. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share all my thoughts I have about being yourself, including the mechanism behind being yourself. It might include the pathway to finding out more about who you are, but we're going to start off, no big deal. We're going to start off by refreshing even just myself, my thoughts about the position that I hold within my meat vessel. And then also, let's just go ahead and make sure that we know that I have no qualifications to speak on any of this. I don't actually usually, I talk like I know what I'm talking about, but I don't know what I'm talking about. So if it makes sense to you, congratulations, you might also be a crazy person, but I like it. So now let's move on. How do I think that I relate to my position inside of my brain? And then that's going to help us figure out more about who we are. This in particular is the part that my coworker thought I was insane when I started describing it to him. But the brain does everything that we are, and that's things like automatically controlling whether we breathe and stuff. And also the cool things like me being me deciding to put on VR and be a kitty cat and film a video today. The brain did that, like obviously. What I'm emphasizing here is the very simple point. There's the part of me that makes decisions and some part, which also is of the brain, that automatically pumps the blood of the heart. That's not a decision that I make. The brain does that on its own. And that's kind of just the first leap of logic we have to make. Is there's systems of the brain which are outside of what I consider to be myself. I don't pump the blood. The brain automatically does that on its own, so I don't have to worry about it. There's a separation. There's systems of the brain which are not my systems. We have to agree on that point, or else we're not going to agree on this video, and I just have to move on from there, but that's my premise, is there's parts of the systems of the brain which are not me, I exist, and other parts of the brain also exist. That's my basis. The next point we need to agree with, and I think it's understandable, is emotions come from somewhere outside of us. The argument there, I think, is pretty simple. You aren't able to decide how you feel about anything. Emotions just kind of like come from somewhere, and only after you feel the emotion are you then able to respond to it or think about it. You can't make yourself care about something that you just don't care about. Whatever that kind of care energy is, there's some sort of an emotional attachment to things you care about. You can't make yourself care if you just don't care. You can't force that emotion state about. So too, can you just decide not to be angry suddenly because you're still angry? You can decide what to do with it. But that anger, the fear, happiness, all these things come from somewhere outside of you. And the only key language I can use to help cement this point is that the emotion happened first and then I was able to think about it. That separation is what helps me feel comfortable saying that the emotion came from some circuitry outside of me. I don't understand where that came from, how that works. It happened, and then I became aware that it happened. The emotion happened first, and then I became aware of it. We have to move on from that point also, unfortunately, but that's my second premise. Which, to repeat, there are systems of the brain which are outside of me, and also, my body of emotionality is one of those systems which exists outside of me. And before we can proceed, I have to apologize for my language, because I don't have qualifications, I don't have learning, I don't know these things. I'm probably talking about what I think might be the ego, or what I think might be the conscious versus the subconscious brain. Like, I got no idea. But the part of the brain which thinks about what it is, the brain that thinks that it is it, that I am, the brain that thinks that I am what me is, that me, that is a subsystem of the brain. It doesn't feel very great to me to say I am a subsystem of a brain which is outside of me, which is what I'm contending. That language doesn't feel very good. What I might agree a little bit more with is like I, the part of the brain which considers itself to be itself, is part of a bigger whole, which is the brain, your emotional center, the system of the self which thinks that it is itself, the part which automatically beats the heart. These are all parts of the brain which are all doing like brain things. Okay, now we're done with that. Let's actually start talking about who we are. The argument of the language has to come down to where do you draw the line at self? Who are you? Because the part of the brain which considers itself to be itself is itself a subroutine. As many people consider themselves to be themselves and they have emotions that they don't understand. I would prefer to consider my brain having a center which processes emotions and a center which also processes me. I have to keep the scope of this video narrow or we will absolutely get even more lost than we might already be. So let's just take the words we have so far and apply them to being yourself. My belief is that if my conscious brain, me, if I am a subroutine of the meat vessel in my head, then the same biological machine which creates me also creates the other parts that have to do with my meat vessel. And because I don't understand emotions or where they come from, I don't understand the meat structure that created those emotions. So I can't understand the meat structure, which also created me, as I am able to think and understand what I am. I suppose what I'm saying here is that because I can't understand where I came from, I won't be able to understand what I am. Not really. This brings us into being yourself. Because if you can't ever understand your nature, you can't ever understand what or how you are, because those parts of the brain are locked off to the conscious mind, which is what considers itself to be itself. It's pretty important to stop trying. Sometimes we might be a little uncertain how to act because we don't know who we are. You will never know who you are. You are not ever going to be able to know who you are. That's just locked off in the shadow realm of the electric meat, buddy. It does things that you won't be able to ever understand. You are something you will never be able to understand. There is something which gives me a bit of a saving grace when it comes to this whole weird thought experiment of never knowing who I am, which helps me feel better because I didn't know who I was. So it's like, oh, well, great, well, I was never supposed to win that game, which is neither here nor there. But here's how I propose we proceed. I do tend to think, some days, that I'm pretty neat. Phineas Former does a good job. I'm usually pretty happy with my actions, the things that I do. You know, I tend to think I'm smart enough sometimes. Yeah. eh. 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 And it's not too much of a leap to say that I also take pride in the electric meat, the brain, that created me, the cognition space where I live inside of. There's a meat vessel, a structure, a biological nonsense that did that. So I take pride in the machine that also allows me to be inside of the small pocket subroutine of consciousness that I consider to be myself, which does consider itself to be itself. I think the machine did a pretty good job. Because I consider myself to be smart, and I understand I exist as a subroutine of electric meat, I consider the electric meat also to be smart. This is a tenuous thread of logic, but I'm able to use it to trust in the electric meat if it's smart enough for my cognition self to feel smart sometimes. It can be smart about the other things that I don't understand whatsoever. And I don't understand how emotions work, but I don't think that they work against me. I just feel like the electric meat is doing its thing and it knows what's going on. Better than I do, at least. What I want to say with all of this is that emotions come from someplace that we don't really understand, that are not directly us. We've talked about that. We understand. But what we haven't really touched on yet is impulses. Also come from that same place. You have the impulse to do something, and then you're able to think about it and consider it. Like why yes or why no. Your ideas come from somewhere, and then you're able to think about them. Whenever you have an impulse, that came from probably that same emotion processy. It came from somewhere other than you, the conscious part of you. The electric meat came up with something. I usually listen to those Because if the electric meat comes up with something, and the electric meat also came up with me, the cognition, whatever, the part of me that decides to put on VR gear and become a kitty cat, questionable decision. But the impulse that I receive to do something comes from somewhere outside of myself, yet still from a structure which contains myself. Whenever I don't know what else to do, what else is going on in my life, I try to listen to those impulses because they're related to me. They came from the same place where I also originate. I don't understand them, I don't understand where they come from, but when I follow through the impulses that I receive, and to an extent allow my emotions to be, I don't have to do anything with them, just allow them, I suppose. But the argument right now is just the impulses that you receive. The electric meat gave that to me. And I listen, because I'm not doing anything else with my life. And now to bring it home with being yourself, right? Only a few things. To follow through my, school of thought, you have to acknowledge that you exist as part of a grander whole which you will never be able to understand. And this would be a grander self. I belong to the electric meat. Not quite. I exist as a subroutine of electric meat inside of a flesh vessel, which also controls other subroutines. To be myself most fully includes leaning into the parts of the electric meat that I do not understand. Impulses to do things come from somewhere I do not understand. The best that I know how to be myself is to follow through on the impulses that my higher self brings. Because as just like a person, I make dumb choices all of the time. But sometimes when the electric meat sends a decision or an impulse and I go along with that, it feels like that choice came from a system which knows more than I do because I myself exist only as a small part of the system. If the system has an idea, well, shoot, I'm not doing anything else. And following through on those shadow impulses is where I find some semblance of being myself. It's not perfect, doesn't make much sense. There's only so much you can do. And the unfortunate thing here, as far as the advice, be yourself, right? What I basically contend is in order to be yourself, you have to open yourself up to a lot of elements of mystery and things of the unknown. You have to be comfortable not knowing who you are because you can't ever know who you are. So you can't ever know what the decisions are that you're making if you follow through on the impulses because the idea came to you. So just, all right, sure, I guess we'll do that then. You're going to have to be really comfortable doing things you don't understand. My thing there is you don't have to understand it because that's not your job. As a subroutine inside of the brain, your job is to shoot down the really crappy ideas. Your job is not to craft an entire sense of identity. The meat, all the other subroutines exist for that. The only thing I might suggest is to shoot down fewer ideas, be more okay doing things which are more unknown, because all of those impulses came from somewhere outside of you, yet also from the same system which contains you. That language has helped me, at least in the past, and that's it. Those are my thoughts. It didn't tidy up very nicely. I don't know if I ever super explained, how to be yourself. It's just do things you don't understand, but try to listen to those impulses when they come, and usually I'm not met with any more failure than if I had made a decision on my own without impulse. It's going to be it, though. Hope you liked it. I hope it makes a little bit of sense, because I was thinking about it at work. I was bored at work. I had nothing else to do at work, so I thought about that. No big deal. Okay, I'm going to go now. Bye, guys.